Once upon a time, believing in certain things marked you as a crank. A government running secret experiments on its own citizens? Unthinkable. A cabal of wealthy elites manipulating world events from behind closed doors? Absurd. Poison in your food supply? Chemicals in the water? Cameras hidden in plain sight? Only the true paranoid would dare say such things out loud. But lately, something has shifted. The documents are being unsealed, the whistleblowers are speaking. The scandals are breaking out decades later, but in real time. And suddenly, the people we used to laugh at, the ones with the basement filing cabinets and corkboards strung with red yarn, they don't sound so crazy anymore. In fact, they're starting to sound like prophets. And here's the part that unsettles more than it confronts. If so many of these conspiracies have turned out to be true, then what else might be hiding in the shadows? When deception becomes routine, trust isn't just eroded, it collapses. We're left scanning every headline for the catch, every smiling politician for the lie. The thin line between myth and reality isn't just blurring, it's dissolving. Chapter 1, From Ridicule to Revelation. Our story begins with three tales that at first sound like the fevered dreams of a tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist. Stories whispered over crackling shortwave radios, traded in dog-eared pamphlets at back alley meetings, or jotted down in cramped margins of a library book no one else checked out. Tales so outlandish that to believe them marked you as gullible, uneducated, or dangerously paranoid, and yet every one of them would eventually prove true. First, there's MKUltra. The rumor started in the 1950s, shadowy CIA scientists experimenting with mind control, dosing prisoners and psychiatric patients with hallucinogens, subjecting them to days of sleep deprivation, sensory isolation, and psychological torment. There were even whispers about programmed assassins, human beings stripped of free will and turned into weapons. Officials laughed off these claims. Paranoid fiction, they called it. But the facade cracked in the mid-70s, when the post-Watergate climate of suspicion led to the Church Committee hearings in Congress. What they uncovered was worse than the rumors. MKUltra wasn't a single experiment. It was a sprawling network of more than 150 sub-projects operating through at least 80 institutions, universities, hospitals, prisons, often without the knowledge of the administrators in charge. People were drugged without consent in bars, hotel rooms, and even their own homes. One CIA employee, Frank Olson, plunged to his death from a New York hotel window after being secretly dosed with LSD. A taking of his life his family would spend decades questioning. The program's architect, Sidney Gottlieb, ordered most of the files destroyed in 1973, leaving only a paper trail of fragments. The few documents that survived told a story of a government willing to tamper with the human mind itself in the pursuit of control. By the time the public learned the truth, many victims were either dead, institutionalized, or had spent their lives not knowing why their sanity had suddenly collapsed. Their suffering had been erased from history until history came knocking. Then there's the Tuskegee syphilis study, a chapter in American medicine so grotesque it reads like dystopian fiction. In 1932, the U.S. Public Health Service recruited hundreds of black men in Macon County, Alabama, under the guise of treating bad blood. In reality, the doctors were studying the natural progression of untreated syphilis. The men weren't told their diagnosis, nor were they offered penicillin after it became the standard cure in 1947. Instead, they were given placebos and lied to about their health, while the disease slowly ravaged their bodies, leading to blindness, mental deterioration, and death. For 40 years, rumors of the study trickled through black communities, dismissed by outsiders as racially charged exaggerations. It wasn't until 1972, when whistleblower Peter Buxton leaked documents to the Associated Press, that the full horror reached the national stage. The fallout was immediate: outrage, lawsuits, and a rare public apology from the federal government. By then, at least 128 men had died directly from syphilis or related complications. Wives had been unknowingly infected. Children were born with congenital syphilis. The generational trauma would ripple through families for decades, a lasting monument to medical exploitation hiding in plain sight. And then there's COINTELPRO, the FBI's secret program to infiltrate, disrupt, and destroy activist movements. For years, civil rights leaders, anti-war organizers, and feminists claimed that the government was sabotaging sabotaging them from within, planting informants, spreading forged letters to sow division, and using the media to discredit leaders. These warnings were routinely dismissed as delusional. And then in 1971, a small group of citizens calling themselves the Citizens of Commission to Investigate, the FBI broke into the FBI field office in Media, Pennsylvania. They stole over 1,000 classified documents and mailed them to major newspapers. The files revealed the existence of COINTELPRO and its explicit directive to expose, disrupt, and misdirect, discredit, and otherwise neutralize political groups. The program targeted Martin Luther King Jr., the Black Panthers, Native American activists, Vietnam War protesters, and even journalists who reported on government misconduct. The methods were ruthless: harassment, false arrests, the spreading of dangerous rumors designed to incite violence within activist groups. It was state-sanctioned psychological warfare against American citizens. These revelations didn't just vindicate a handful of fringe believers. They redrew the map of what was possible. The most trusted institutions in the country had engaged in actions that only years earlier were dismissed as absurd fabrications, and they've gotten away with it. The pattern became disturbingly clear. First, the official denial, then the ridicule of anyone who dared to speak up, a slow, reluctant leak of evidence, and finally, undeniable proof, delivered too late for the truth to change the outcome. By the time the public was allowed to see the facts, the damage had calcified into history. The victims had no justice. The architects of these programs had retired, been promoted, or quietly faded from public life, and the public had absorbed a dangerous new lesson. If these impossible things could be true, anything could be true. The boundary between the plausible and the absurd had been breached, and once crossed, it could never fully be repaired. Chapter 2. The Internet made us all witnesses. Before the Internet, conspiracy culture lived in shadows. It thrived in the flicker of a 16mm projectors at fringe conferences, and badly photocopied signs handed out at bus stops, and the static of late-night call-in radio shows where voices were half whispered, half shouted into the void. Proof, or what passed it, moved slowly. A grainy photograph, a dog-eared dossier, an antidote from a friend of a friend, that traveled no further than the dinner counter or the back of a smoke-filled bar. It was passed hand to hand like contraband, vulnerable to suppression. Authorities could contain it, dismiss it, or simply let it die out in obscurity, its edges worn away by the time and forgetfulness. Now the rules have changed. One leaked email, one smartphone video, one cache of files uploaded to a public service can ignite a movement overnight. And not just one city or in one country, but everywhere at once. The internet has turned us all into witnesses, archivists, and, in some cases, unwitting propagators of both truth and fiction. With a single click, we can amplify a revelation or a lie to millions before breakfast. Consider the Panama Papers. In April 2016, 11.5 million confidential documents from the Panamanian law firm Mossack Fonseca were leaked to the press. They detailed the offshore holdings of the world's elite, presidents, prime ministers, CEOs, celebrities. For decades, the notion that billionaires and politicians were hiding their fortunes in a vast web of offshore accounts had been treated as cynical fantasy, the sort of thing only populist firebrands or conspiracy cranks would insist upon. But the leak didn't just confirm it. It laid out the mechanics, the shell companies, the money trails. It named names. It forced resignations. Iceland's prime minister stepped down. Pakistan's prime minister was ousted. The data was too vast to bury, too public to spin, and it didn't come on as a slow trickle. It hit the internet all at once, like a lightning strike that lit up every corner of the world at the same moment. The same digital floodgates opened for the Snowden revelations in 2013. For years, privacy advocates warned that governments were engaged in massive surveillance of their own citizens. Most people dismissed it as paranoia until NSA contractor Edward Snowden handed over classified documents showing a surveillance apparatus more invasive than anyone had imagined. In an instant, the conversation shifted from "is this happening?" to "how much of my life is being watched right now?" Without the internet to transmit those documents worldwide in seconds, they might have been intercepted, spun, or buried. Then there's the once unthinkable subject of UFOs, or in the Pentagon's preferred terminology, UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomena. For decades, those who claimed to have seen them were mocked, lumped in with Bigfoot hunters and moon landing hoaxers. Hollywood used flying saucers as shorthand for company science fiction. But in December 2017, the New York Times published a bombshell. The U.S. government had quietly run a secret multi-million-dollar program to investigate unexplained aerial encounters. Alongside the article came declassified Navy cockpit footage, grainy infrared clips of objects moving in ways no aircraft could. Pilots described them as impossible and beyond our technology. Overnight, UFOs left the realm of supermarket tabloid covers and entered sober discussions on CNN, BBC, and even official congressional hearings. The question was no longer whether something was out there, but why were we only being told now? It's not just headline events. Smaller revelations happen daily, triggered by ordinary people with smartphones. A police body cam video leaks, contradicting an official report. A corporate memo surfaces on Reddit, detailing plans to gut worker protections. A viral TikTok exposes unsafe factory conditions halfway across the world. The gatekeepers of information are no longer just editors and producers. They're anyone with Wi-Fi and a willingness to hit upload. But this new reality carries its own dangers. Social media is a double-edged sword of the digital age. On one side, it exposes real corruption faster than traditional media could ever manage. It gives whistleblowers a direct line to the public, bypassing political and corporate filters. On the other, it is the perfect breeding ground for falsehoods. The same platforms that hosted the Panama Papers also played host to Pizzagate, a baseless conspiracy accusing a Washington, D.C. pizzeria of running a child trafficking ring, an accusation so persistent that it led to an armed man showing up at the restaurant demanding to see the non-existent basement. And the tools of deception are getting sharper. Deepfake technology can now create video so realistic that it's almost impossible to tell the real from fabricated. Fabricated screenshots can be manufactured in seconds. Audio clips can be cloned to make a public figure say anything at all. A shaky cell phone clip can spark legitimate outrage, or ignite a baseless moral panic that destroys reputations before the truth can even form a defense. In the pre-internet world, suppressing information was often as simple as denying it existed. Today, suppression takes a new form, flooding the information space with so many conflicting narratives that no one can tell which one is real. The goal is no longer to erase the truth, but to bury it under an avalanche of alternative truths until the public gives up on finding it. The internet has made it impossible to fully bury a secret, but it has also made it impossible to fully trust any revelation. Every breaking story now exists in a fog of conflicting narratives, memes, edits, and manipulations. We are all drowning in data, left to decide for ourselves which signals are truth and which are noise. And with this, it's easy to forget that both can coexist, and sometimes they do. Chapter 3. Who profits from the paranoia? Not every conspiracy revelation bursts into the public eye by accident. Many arrive at a carefully controlled timetable. Not when the truth matters the most, but when it matters the least. Sometimes the truth isn't uncovered at all. It's released like a caged animal that's been fanged and declawed, safe for public viewing only when it can no longer bite the hand that kept it hidden. Governments have turned this into an art form. They control the narrative not just by denying the truth, but deciding when they're allowed to know it. Documents are stamped top secret for decades, sealed away until the crimes they detail have aged into history. Consider the slow trickle of revelations about CIA-backed coups in Latin America and the Middle East. For years, these were wild accusations until declassified files confirmed them as fact. But by then, the leaders ousted were long gone. The nation's destabilized, and the architects of those coups were enjoying retirement or writing memoirs. Declassification becomes a performance, a way to appear transparent while ensuring no one can be prosecuted and no real reform can take place. Corporations have their own version of this time-delayed truth. Big Tobacco perfected it in the 20th century. Internal research showed that nicotine was highly addictive and that smoking caused cancer, yet executives swore under oath that they didn't believe it. They funded counter studies, manipulated science, and ran ad campaigns featuring doctors cheerfully recommending cigarette brands. The truth only came out in the 1990s after whistleblowers leaked documents and lawsuits pried open corporate archives. By then, the damage was beyond repair. Millions dead, a public hooked, and the industry still profiting off a global market. The pharmaceutical industry followed a similar script with the opioid crisis. Purdue Pharma and others marketed painkillers like OxyContin as non-addictive, a claim that was not only false, but directly contradicted by their own internal studies. They sent sales reps into doctors' offices armed with cherry-picked data and rewarded prescribers who handed out pills by the thousands. The truth emerged through lawsuits and investigative journalism, but only after opioids had killed hundreds of thousands and reshaped entire communities into landscapes of grief. Even environmental disasters follow the delayed disclosure pattern. For decades, oil companies like Exxon had internal research showing the link between fossil fuels and climate change, research dating back to the 70s, but chose not to bury it, funding think tanks to cast doubt on the science. But by the time those internal memoirs came to light, the effects of climate change were already unfolding, and reversing them was no longer a question of prevention but damage control. And then there are politicians who don't just benefit from conspiracy narratives, they actively manufacture them. They understand something primal about human psychology. Fear is one of the most powerful political currencies. A frightened population is more likely to give up freedoms to rally behind strong leaders, and to accept simplistic answers to complex problems. During the Cold War, McCarthyism weaponized the idea of hidden communist threat, destroying careers and silencing dissent. In the post-9/11 world, the war on terror framed civil liberties as expendable in the face of a nebulous, ever-present enemy. The tactics are eerily similar to those in the 1980s satanic panic, when daycares, heavy metal bands, and even children's cartoons were accused of being tools for the devil. The hysteria was stoked by televangelists, talk shows, and politicians who saw political and financial opportunity in the moral outrage. Fear sold books, filled pews, and won elections, while also justifying increased policing, censorship, and social control. The fact that the accusations were false didn't matter. In the court of public opinion, the spectacle was the point. This is the uncomfortable truth. Fear, whether based on reality or manufactured from whole cloth, is a commodity. Real conspiracies prove that the world can be dangerous and corrupt. False conspiracies give those in power a tool to direct that fear towards convenient targets: immigrants, protesters, political opponents, and subcultures. Either way, someone profits, and it's almost never the people who uncover the truth. The lesson here is sobering. The revelation of a conspiracy doesn't necessarily lead to justice or change. In fact, the timing and framing of that revelation often serves the very institutions it exposes. And once the public learns that real conspiracies exist, they become more susceptible to false ones, a feedback loop that keeps fear alive, profitable, and endlessly reusable. Chapter 4, When the Line Blurs. We're all living in an age of what could be called conspiracy fatigue. Every day brings a new headline, a new leak, a new theory. Some are grounded in meticulously documented fact. Others are spun from nothing but half-remembered memes and bad Photoshop, but online they live side by side, on the same feeds and the same threads, competing for the same outrage clicks. The result? Truth and fiction begin to feel indistinguishable. A perfect example is QAnon, perhaps the most infamous conspiracy movement of the past decade. On the surface, it claimed to expose global cabal of elites engaged in unspeakable crimes. At its core, it bore real historical threads, actual instances of political corruption, confirmed cases of human trafficking, and documented tendency of powerful people to protect each other from consequences. But it wove those threads into a vast, fantastical tapestry. Secret military tribunals, coded messages hidden in tweets, and an insider known as Q. What began as a fringe internet game muted into a mass movement, one that blurred reality with fantasy so thoroughly that adherents could point to real scandals as proof of imaginary ones. This blurring has cultural consequences that run deep. When real conspiracies and fabricated ones occupy the same cultural space, trust becomes the first casualty. If everything might be a lie, then nothing feels solid. Public institutions lose credibility, but so do independent watchdogs. The question who benefits becomes less about uncovering the truth and more about deciding which version of the lie you prefer. The pandemic years intensified this phenomenon. The internet became a battlefield of competing narratives, some pointing to legitimate government missteps, corporate profiteering, and genuine public health failures, others claiming microchips and vaccines or engineered depopulation agendas. The same platforms that hosted peer-reviewed studies also amplified unverified TikTok videos racking up millions of views. In this environment, even the most measured voices are drowned out by the volume of noise. And then there's the way old tropes never die, they just rebrand. Secret societies plotting world domination, shadow elites controlling the media, population control schemes, the ideas appear in every generation, from pamphlets in the 1800s to YouTube rabbit holes today. Sometimes they're grounded in kernels of truth, like historical examples of real cabals or actual government overreach. Other times they're repackaged. Xenophobia, anti-Semitism, or political propaganda dressed in modern hashtags. The recycling is constant, and the internet ensures each retelling spreads faster than the last. What emerges from all of this is the dangerous kind of apathy. When the line between fact and fiction is permanently smudged, people either believe everything or believe nothing. For those in power, that's the perfect outcome. A public too confused to unite, too distracted to hold anyone accountable, and too exhausted to care when the next scandal breaks. If enough conspiracies come true, the world itself starts to lose meaning. Conspiracy theory becomes a catch-all, not for wild-eyed paranoia, but for any truth too uncomfortable to face in real time. And once that threshold is crossed, something fundamental shifts in the public psyche. We stop asking if something could happen and start assuming it already has. Every press conference feels like theater. Every official denial sounds like a confession. The burden of proof flips. It's no longer on the accuser, but on the accused, and the accused rarely care to answer. That's a real danger of this era. It's not that real conspiracies exist, that they always have. It's that the endless mix of fact and fabrication has left us disoriented. In this fog, the truth becomes just another player in the field, competing for attention against lies that are louder, flashier, and easier to believe. And with truth and lies are equally disposable, the people in power can move freely in the shadows. So the next time you hear a theory that sounds too far-fetched to be true, ask yourself, is this fantasy, is this a warning, or is it tomorrow's headline waiting for the right moment to be believed? Because history has already answered one question for us. The only thing more dangerous than a conspiracy theory is when it stops being a theory at all. I mean, it is crazy to think so many of the conspiracy theories have come true, especially as of lately, like a lot of the COVID conspiracy theories. I mean, I can't even probably mention a lot of this right now on YouTube because the video will probably get taken down. But I mean, it is crazy to think that, I guess maybe hopefully they're being revealed more now with the internet versus like back in the day where like it'd be in a vault for 50 years and then later the files would come out. So let me know in the comments below your thoughts on all these conspiracy theories. Do you believe them? I mean, I believe a lot of them, but I've just always kind of been that way. So anyways, just let me know in the comments below. I'm so curious your thoughts. All right, thanks for watching.